Welcome to Notable Approvals. I'm attorney Amanda Shaffer. Today we have another interesting asylum case to talk about. If you joined us last week, we've been talking a lot about asylum and withholding of removal, and that is in anticipation of the live Q&A discussion that attorney Aaron Shapiro and I will be co-hosting this Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We will answer your questions live about asylum and withholding. And you can also email us questions in advance. So like us, follow us on Facebook, don't miss out. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., I invite you to join us for a special notable approval. We will be talking about a very interesting case that was approved recently. That was an I-751 waiver case, but we had to file a writ of mandamus, which is essentially suing the federal government to get them to act, and it worked, and it was awesome. So I'm gonna talk about that tomorrow. Again, if you like us, follow us, you won't miss a beat. Today's case is about a client who is a native and citizen of China. He's actually from the Tibetan region of China. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the politics over there, I'm sure you've heard of like Free Tibet. Well, it's a very disputed region over there that the Tibetans want to be separate from China, and that China does not want them to be separate. And this has been going on for decades. Just for a very long time. And the Tibetans are treated very poorly over there. So if you were to ask my client where he's from, he's going to say Tibet. But if you ask the Chinese government, they're going to say China. Anyway, so my client is a Buddhist monk. And his asylum claim was based on three different categories: religion as a Buddhist, his ethnicity as a Tibetan, and on his political opinion, on believing that the Tibet should be separate from China. And he went to a monastery starting at a young age, and was kind of introduced to this persecution that all Tibetan monks faced at a very early age too. When he was 14 years old, the Chinese soldiers came to the monastery. They destroyed and burned everything that was related to the teachings of Buddha. They beat a bunch of protesters, put a lot of fear in my client. But that was not the only incident. There were plenty of times he was protesting the government where he had to run away. The military even came to his home 3 times. They tore through searching for any type of Buddhist artifacts or teachings, and if they found any of it, like a statue, they would burn it. So, and it wasn't just him, it was everyone, like I said, in that region. The Tibetans had a 6 p.m. curfew. They couldn't go out after 6 p.m. The Chinese government would refuses to give the Tibetans travel documents and passports, so they can't even go anywhere. They're kind of like prisoners in their own country. At one point, his father was arrested for being suspected of being a spy. His father was actually a driver for the Chinese government. He was not a monk like my client was, but nonetheless, somebody suspected him being a spy. They detained him. They beat him for 4 days, and they didn't release him until somebody paid a hefty sum. And there were people throughout his village that were spies for the Chinese government. So if they knew you were organizing a protest, they would tell on you, and you would then get arrested. So it was pretty rough living over there. And eventually he realized that, he was never going to be free here, and he needed to get out. The problem was, how do you get out without a travel document? So his uncle paid off some corrupt Chinese official to give him a travel document, and he started off on foot towards India. But the border at that time between India and China was closed, so he had to go to Tibet. So he took a bus to Nepal. He took a bus to Nepal, and then he stayed there for about 3 or 4 months. He did not file for asylum there because Nepal is politically aligned with the Chinese government, and if he were to tell them that he was Tibetan, they likely would have deported him back to China. He then went up to India, and then he was there for a little while as well, but he couldn't apply for asylum there either for similar reasons. India was at the time, and I believe still now, is more aligned with the Chinese government and likely to deport anyone who is suspected of being Tibetan or Chinese. But even if they weren't, the problem is that for him to become a citizen there, they don't have the same rights as an Indian citizen. So in the US, there's only one level of citizenship. You become a US citizen, you're either a US citizen or you're not a US citizen. If you are a US citizen, you get all the rights that come with being a US citizen. In India, they have, the caste system, and then they also have different tiers, so to speak, of citizenship. And only certain people can become full-bred citizens, and that did not include anyone from China or Tibet. So he eventually was able to get a passport from somebody to borrow to board a plane to come to New York. And he had to pay a smuggler. And when they took a layover in Paris, he actually handed back the passport to the person that he used to board the plane. So when he got off of the plane in JFK, he had no identity documents, no entry documents. So he got to the CBP. They said, where's your permission to enter the country? And he said, I don't have anything. And they said, okay. They sent him to secondary inspection. He said he was afraid to return home. They gave him what's called a credible fear interview. They determined that he did have a credible fear of returning back to China. So they put him in immigration detention and set him up to have a hearing with the immigration judge. At first, we weren't his attorney yet. He had a pro bono attorney representing him in court, and he wasn't thrilled with their services because they missed their chance to bail him out. So he ended up sitting in detention for about a year. We were hired about a month before his individual or merits hearing. So we had a lot of work to do in a short period of time, but it wasn't a problem. We did have a couple of interesting issues to face. I talked about how he moved around before coming to the US, that he spent time in Nepal and India. So we had to make sure we were able to explain that. But the bigger problem was that he had nothing to prove that he was born in China or Tibet or anywhere. He had no birth certificate because they didn't get one. Like I said, they weren't giving travel documents like a passport. So we had to actually bring in, and this is rare that we really need an expert witness, but this is an example of when we did. We had to bring in some experts on Tibet, and they had to talk to him in his dialect. They talked to him about where he grew up to kind of verify that he knew the area. And really it was a question of, usually it's not a question of fact where somebody is born because they have a passport, they have a birth certificate, but this is one of those situations where he really didn't have anything. And that was the biggest challenge, and the biggest challenge that other Tibetans face, because they walk in, they don't have anything to prove who they are. Fortunately, the judge agreed with us that he was most certainly born in China in the Tibetan region, and that he was persecuted and is likely to be persecuted were he to return to China. So I didn't actually go to this hearing. Attorney Aaron Shapiro did. So I didn't meet the client until he was released from detention. That day he came to our office, gave him a great big hug. It was a really, really memorable moment for me. That was his first time being free on US soil. And just the happiness and joy and relief that he had, I'll never forget that experience. And again, I've mentioned before, this is the reason why that I really enjoy doing asylum cases, because when they're granted, that life-changing moment for a client means so much to be a part of. That is all for today on notable approvals. Remember tomorrow to tune in 3 p.m. We have a time certain. At 3 p.m. Eastern Time, I'll be talking about the I-751 and the writ of mandamus. And then this Thursday, September 24th, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, don't forget, we have our live Q&A discussion on asylum and withholding removal. We're going to answer your questions live, and you can also send those questions to us in advance. And if you need immediate assistance, please give us a call, 212-444-8064. And like us, follow us so you don't miss any more. Thanks for watching, everyone.